Have you heard of plants that some people call relatively difficult? This video, I want to talk about some difficult plants that actually, in my experience, have been a breeze to grow. Don't worry, I will tell you everything that I did in order to keep these plants happy in case you ever want to attempt growing some of these plants. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, today I want to touch on the topic of what some plants out there, not all of them, might be known as slightly difficult, temperamental, people can't get them to kind of survive well. And I'll tell you about my experiences that kind of bucks that trend. So plants that were meant to be difficult that actually have been a breeze to grow. This kind of links into another video that I did recently, which was my plug and pray plants. So plants that were meant to be easy, but actually were anything but, and I will link it at the top there in case you haven't seen that video. This is kind of the yin to that yang, basically. So without further ado, let me go through the plants with you. So starting off strong, I want to touch on a specific Anthurium. And Anthuriums by and large, not all of them, but Anthuriums by and large have got this concept behind them that, you know what, they're not super easy, they can be a challenge to grow, people might struggle with them more than they might do with other house plants. There's also a bit of a discussion around that, you know what, if you've got not an awful lot of experience when it comes to houseplants, maybe give Anthuriums a miss for a while until you get your footing. Now, the first plant on the list is an Anthurium, and it is an Anthurium that you might be able to see right there. So obviously this is a Philodendron esmeraldense. This is an Anthurium esmeraldense, for the people that might not know. And you can see they've got very similar leaf structure. Granted, the Anthurium esmeraldense is a bit shorter. It's still got those ruffles that are happening on the plant, but it is an Anthurium and this is a Philodendron. Now, a lot of people are sleeping on this plant, and I will say it is a crying shame because, and I'll see if I can add some pictures or clips here as well so you can kind of see it in a bit more detail. It is a beautiful plant and it is a very simple plant. It's giving slight vibes of Anthurium veitchii. So you get those kind of ruffles, those kind of abs a bit. It's not quite as tight as the Anthurium veitchii, and the leaves don't get as large. I'm looking at my Anthurium veitchii at the top there, and hopefully I'll put a picture here. So it's not exactly the same, but it's similar enough that you still get that kind of vibe. You get that kind of ruffled texture on the leaves. The reason why it's making this list, and I know, and I'll say this in the very beginning of the video before anybody else says anything, some of these plants are growing in my conservatory. However, a lot of these plants I have grown in regular household humidity and they were absolutely fine. They had no issue. Does growing them in relatively higher humidity and in the conservatory give them a bit of a boost? Yes, but that would be the case for most tropical plants, and I'm not going to hide behind that. But these are also a lot of the plants that just did absolutely fine in regular household humidity without skipping a beat. So, as I said, much a slept on plant, but super easy. And I'll tell you a bit more about what I kind of do with its care. I'll tell you roughly kind of how I'm growing it. So that specific plant I am growing in semi-hydro. It's in a semi-hydro mix. Specifically, it's the chunky, I'm looking at it now, the chunky semi-hydro mix from Soil Ninja, but you could grow it quite happily. It's got very chunky roots, so it's a good Anthurium in that respect. I always find Anthuriums, and if you are struggling a bit with Anthuriums, and you maybe want to take a step back but still attempt Anthuriums, my big tip for you would be go for Anthuriums that have got thicker roots, because some Anthuriums have got thinner roots. I've talked about this on previous videos. The ones with the thicker roots tend to be a bit more forgiving, especially if you're an underwaterer. If you're an overwaterer, you could arguably go for some of the thinner root Anthuriums because you'll be watering a bit more frequently. But again, I'll say I am an kind of self-proclaimed overwaterer. That plant in semi-hydro seems to do absolutely fine. It gets kind of bright indirect, and it can do really well in medium light as well. It tends to go under my shelf. I've got an awful lot of grow lights on at the moment because it's winter, but I've had it for at least 2 winters so far where I didn't have anywhere near as many grow lights, and it was one of the few anthuriums that consistently, even in the winter, kept growing. Doesn't really suffer too much from pests or at all for that matter. Water it when the kind of media goes dry in the winter. I pull back from the reservoir entirely if it's in semi-hydro, and in the summer I give it a bit of a reservoir. Absolutely fine, never had any problems with it. Technically meant to be a difficult type of plant because it's an anthurium, but really wasn't that much of an issue. And I do think I've got at least 1 or 2 other anthuriums on this list. Right, the next plant is a philodendron, and it's a philodendron that, ironically enough, was probably my first ever video that I ever did on this channel on YouTube many, many years ago, and it is still a firm favorite of mine. I have got it in different places in the house. I cannot move it right now, so there is one chunk of it here. There's another one that I've got in one of the spare rooms upstairs. There's one that is growing in my bathroom, and there is one that's growing in the office. So a whole slew of different environments. So the guest room can get really cold because I don't always run the heating in there in the winter. The office has probably got the most subpar lighting ever. In here, obviously, it gets all of these conditions, but it doesn't get a huge volume of light, at least not in the winter. And that's the one there. There's one in the dining room as well. It's all over the places. And people that have been here around for a while might have guessed which plant I am talking about. It is the Philodendron Burle Marx variegated. And the people that have been here for a very long time will know that I had a bit of a version of a tree of this plant at some point. Unfortunately, that was one of the plants that did not make the conservatory refresh, but I took an awful lot of cuttings, as you might be able to tell by all these different places that I have now got this plant growing. And I'm talking about multiple stems in each pot. I'm kind of looking at the one in here, multiple stems in each pot. There's also like chunks of it that I just threw in a vase of water, and I just top up the water. I haven't even changed the water in years now, but it's still growing fine. So the one thing I will say, some people might be saying, you know what, it's not meant to be a difficult plant. Yes. Some people might say it's an easy plant, and I will give you that. But variegated philodendrons as a whole don't tend to be super easy to grow. This is one that, and this is a hill that I am willing to die on essentially, is super, super easy. Yes, the variegation can be unstable at times, but there's a reason that a lot of people for years now have been saying this is a great plant to start if you are thinking about getting into variegated plants, because it's super easy to just chop it back to the last growing point and that had variegation, and then it will sprout out again. It does, I will warn, it grows in a very weird kind of structure basically. So for the chaotic plant growers out there, people that like a bit chaotic looking plants, this is a great one. If you are very manicured and very minimalist, this might not be the best one for you because it can get a bit, it does weird branching with its kind of stems, and hopefully I've got some pictures that I might be able to show you here so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. It doesn't grow in the traditional one stem grows upwards of something. This is slightly more interesting, but for me that makes it more interesting. And to be fair, even though it can get quite tall, it doesn't ever get super, super wide. So there is that to be said. Kind of a bonus little plant that I will throw into this as well that's very similar but can be a bit more structural. It does get wide though, which is a variegated philodendron, is the Philodendron Houseplantygoodness or Bueno. And that is a beautiful plant. It took me a while, and I've always been very transparent about this on my channel. When I first got it, it took nearly a year to do anything. When it did get going, super, super easy plant, relatively stable variegation as well. I've never had it revert in any way or form. It does dull down, but super, super easy plant. But back to the plant, the main plant of this section, which is the Burle Marx Variegata. How have I grown it? Every way possible. It's been in a chunky aroid soil mix. It's been in a terracotta pot. It's been in plastic pots. It's been in semi-hydro. Some of it is in semi-hydro now. Some of it is in soil. It's absolutely fine. It will throw roots like mad. This is a plant that will go root bound super easy. It's okay a lot of the times I find with this because that will let it dry out enough that it's okay. This is one that be very careful if you're an overwaterer. And if you're an overwaterer, the one thing I will say about this plant, put it in semi-hydro, put it in something like pond, put it in something like leca. It will love its life, but as long as you're letting that media dry out and you're not constantly keeping it wet, you'll be absolutely fine. Does it need high humidity? No. Is it particularly fussy about its light? No. If you don't give it strong enough light, it might just go back to a green version, or it might have less variegation, and as long as you're comfortable with that, that's fine. And I had to add a Hoya on here as well. And again, depends on who it is, but some people might be Hoyas are easy. Some people will be like, Hoyas are really difficult. This is one that ticks a lot of boxes in terms of, in theory, it should be difficult to grow, but in reality, it has been an absolute dream. The Hoya Australis Lisa. And again, this might not come to some surprise as any surprise to some people that have grown this plant. This is a Hoya that is variegated, by and large. I'm pretty sure the Hoya Australis Lisa, I don't think usually you say variegated with this one. I think there's a Hoya Australis. The Lisa is the variegated form of this. It gives interest because those new emerging leaves tend to be kind of reddish or burgundy color, and then they'll kind of mature into that full leaf. You'll get the variegation on them. And one of the reasons why I have it on here is after a while, maybe after the first 6 months to a year, I mean, it's still Hoya, it still takes a while to grow, but after that period of time, this is a Hoya that is super fast. Again, by Hoya standards, super fast, and it will grow constantly. What it has enjoyed, at least in my experience, is bright indirect towards bright light. So this is a plant that I've always had in some of my brightest windows. Maybe in the summer it might get the benefit of a net curtain or maybe pulled back slightly, but it's fine. It doesn't sun stress too much, but it also doesn't mind getting a bit of blast of like sunlight. Do I mean to treat this exactly like you would a cactus in your house? No, probably a tiny bit less light, but only a tiny bit. And in terms of humidity, I've never grown it in here. That plant has always grown in a living room or in other rooms of my house, usually above a radiator as well. So there is that. So it does like to stay warm, I would assume. I've never grown it in cold conditions. So that might be the thing that changes it. I would also assume with a name like Hoya Australis is that probably it originates from Australia. So I would imagine it doesn't appreciate too much of a drop in temperature, but it does get dry around it. It's around a radiator. It's fine. It does get bright light. It will throw blooms like mad. It smells beautiful as well. It is still a Hoya, so you need to keep an eye out for mealybugs. But to be fair, my one has been struggling with mealybugs for over 2 years now. It's never unmanageable. What I will do with that specific plant, and a lot of my bigger Hoyas that can get mealybug kind of like breakouts on occasion, is I'll take it out in the summer and spray it down with a hose, or in the winter I'll put it in the tub and just shower it down with a shower head. And that's usually when it needs watering as well, just because you don't want to be re-wetting the soil when it's not dry, if that makes sense. But other than that, one of, if not the easiest Hoya that I have ever grown, hands down, every time. And you know I had to bring a begonia in on this, and obviously for the people that have been around recently for a recent unboxing or a haul, this is the Begonia Sizemoreae. And it is a beautiful plant. It has got the fuzziness on the leaves, the backs of the leaves, like the kind of polar opposites of the front of the leaves. It can get blooms as well. If I am not mistaken, this is not a cane begonia, this is a rhizomatous begonia. And that is the reason why this deserves a spot on here, because a lot of rhizomatous begonias tend to be the slightly more challenging ones that people might not always get on with too well. I will say this has got to be one of the easiest, if not the easiest. I'm looking at another one that might be on the same par with this, which is a cane begonia, which I'll kind of add pictures here, which is my Begonia bravurimosa. Technically subspecies exotica, but I don't know if everybody just calls it a Begonia bravurimosa now. That's like mad how like consistent and how easy it is to grow. That one I cannot talk about, the bravurimosa. I'm looking at it because it's behind the camera. That one I cannot speak about it ever growing outside of conservatory conditions, and which is why it's not featured. This I have grown in regular household humidity absolutely fine. This is a plant that I have put it in bright indirect light, it is fine. Don't give it too bright of a light. Medium light is fine, and actually not true low light, but lower than you would assume would be okay for this plant, and it was still okay. It wasn't its happiest at the lowest light level, but it was still okay. It's not technically going to be something like a ZZ plant that's going to die off very slowly if it gets no light, but it is one that can tolerate slightly lower light levels. This is a new one that I've got, and again, as I said, because this is something that I had as a whole. However, I can definitely talk from experience from this. Again, the people that have been around on this channel for years will know the original plant that I have still got segments of it left, which has been fondly named Chewbacca because of the fuzziness that is happening on the leaves and on the petioles. Has been with me for nearly 7 years now, probably a bit longer actually, and it has grown in all conditions, all the conditions that I was talking about. Lower humidity, lower lights, higher lights. There is the one thing that I would say with this, and it's not a hard and fast rule with this. This is a plant that does not like to get its leaves wet when you're watering it, basically. So just make sure that you're watering just the growing media there. And as with most rhizomatous begonias, you'll get the newest growing point coming out of the soil. Try not to get that wet. There are other begonias that will mush up super quickly. This is not one of them, but if you want to be extra careful with this, just try bottom watering it and maybe only do the top watering once every so often. But a super easy begonia and a super easy rhizomatous begonia that can be very forgiving, and I have grown in many different conditions and is absolutely fine. I mean, I always kind of gloss on lyrical about this plant just because it's beautiful. It's got the interest. It's got the silvery leaves. It's got that interesting back as well. As I've mentioned previously, and it's difficult to show you on camera now because it needs very specific conditions, and I cannot tell you exactly the conditions. It's just, I can say that I've seen it a few times. In the right light, when it's slightly lower or when the light is kind of hitting it at a very specific angle, not when everything is super bright, you will get a blue tint to the leaves. Almost that kind of blue iridescence that you'll get. And sometimes you might catch it, so usually on a newer leaf, so this is one of its newest leaf that is kind of almost fully hardened now, and it's probably not coming across on the camera, but actually even the way that the light is hitting it now, if I'm at the right angle, I can see a touch of blue iridescence. So it's a very specific condition that you can get it, but this is a really cool one because I almost think of it like a bit of an Easter egg. So it's not something that you're going to see all the time with this plant. You don't buy this plant because it's a blue plant, because it's not. But on those once or twice a year, once or twice every like season that you might just glance at it at the right time and you'll get that blue and it's just like, oh, look, that's kind of cool. I caught it at the right time. It makes it a bit more special. But beyond that, one of, as I said, if not the easiest begonia I have ever grown. Absolutely fine. And it will propagate like a dream as well, either through cutting the leaves and just shoving the cut petiole into soil, or like doing the longer route where you cut up the leaves and you do with the veins and you shove them into some soil or in a pot box. Super easy houseplant. In terms of soil mixes, I've left this in the growers media. My previous one was in the growers media for years, and then I up-potted it into more fern-happy soil. I've also like grown Chewbacca 2.0 in a full kind of like aroid mix, almost like an Anthurium mix, super light, absolutely fine. Super easy. There is something to be said. It can sprawl. This is how it came to me. I'm assuming some of these lower like floppy leaves are going to go, and this is going to be one I'm going to be left at, but it can be quite compact as long as it just gets the right level of light. How about a carnivorous plant now as well? And again, mine is up the top there, but I will see if I can add at least a picture of mine, and I'll find maybe some pictures of what it looks like when it's looking pristine. Mine's looking a bit suspect at the moment, but there's a good reason. It's not a bad reason, it's a good reason. A Nepenthes. I'll see if I can find the specific Nepenthes and put it down at the bottom, but this is going to be the Nepenthes that you can find everywhere. This is the one that you'll get in box stores. The ones where if you can ever see this and you've not specifically searched for a Nepenthes and it doesn't cost the earth because it's a specific cultivar or a specific hybrid, this is going to be the one that you're probably going to end up getting. Super easy, much easier than I have ever experienced with any other carnivorous plant, and I've done an entire video talking about that plant, and I will link it at the top there. It's a relatively old video at this point, but I know that a lot of people found it quite useful. Super, super easy plant. I've probably had that plant now 4 years, 5 years. It's been a while and it's been absolutely fine. I will say something, I have not grown it in this condition. So my conditions is in a net pot, it's hanging, and it's in just sphagnum moss, straight up sphagnum moss, nothing else. I have had a lot of other people that have grown this specific Nepenthes, and they have said the reason why it is so popular, and I actually got it and it was in just pure coco coir, is that a lot of people just like it will grow in regular household house plants, soiled basically, and it will be generally okay. As long as it's not too dense, then you're going to be absolutely fine. This is one that a lot of people were just like, oh, okay, so it's a carnivorous, does it need really specific watering? It can do, but to be fair, for a long period of time, I was growing it in nothing but reverse osmosis water or kind of rainwater. The last 2-3 years now, it's on the same automatic watering line as all of my orchids. So it gets regular tap water with orchid fertilizer, granted it's not particularly strong and it's massively diluted because it goes for everything else, in it. It's still fine. Mine's looking a bit busted, and the reason why mine is looking a bit busted at the moment isn't because the care has changed or it's become a particularly difficult plant. It's because I didn't do the one thing that I would highly suggest that you do in order to keep this plant enjoyable to you, which is, it is still, if I'm not mistaken, technically an aroid, I think. Pretty sure. I'll correct myself if it's not up here. But it grows in a stem. It doesn't stay like a small compact rosette for the rest of its life. It does grow into a long and leggy kind of looking stem with all of the leaves and everything. And I always forget to chop it back enough so that it can kind of stay a bit more compact. So that's the one thing that I would say is remember to prune your Nepenthes plant, and it will be a lot happier for it because it won't just become this kind of weird top heavy kind of like floppy thing like mine's become, but one of the easiest plants, not just as a carnivorous plant, because carnivorous plants can be very exacting in what they need and stuff like that. I've grown it in here, but I also know a lot of people that have said that they've grown this plant successfully in regular household humidity. You might just need to water it a bit more frequently. That frequency of water is something that I will say about the Nepenthes. At the moment, it gets watered every 4 days, I think, in the winter because the light levels aren't high enough, and it's in bright indirect light. But in the summer, this is a plant that, again, because I've got it in sphagnum moss and it can dry quite quickly, this space gets quite hot, I need to water it every 2 days, or if it's really, really hot, every day. So there is that to remember about this. But again, if you're using a different soil media, if you've got it in a household condition, some of these things might vary. If you've got experiences that you want to share about Nepenthes and how you're growing it successfully or unsuccessfully in your house, please do so down below. But this is one that a lot of people tout and are scared of because they assume that it's a difficult plant, but in my experience, it really hasn't. It has been a relatively easy kind of plug and play plant. And again, for the people that have been here for a while, this is one of the plants that I consider a feral plant in my collection. And let's finish off with the Anthurium that I was mentioning earlier on. And the reason why this Anthurium, the Anthurium Renaissance, and hopefully we'll focus on there, is within this list is because it's a variegated Anthurium. Yes, it is a bird's nest Anthurium, so you need to like the look of bird's nest Anthuriums. However, and I think it was Carrie, one of the people that watches the channel, hi Carrie if you watch this, that I was talking to after I originally got this plant, and Carrie mentioned just that, hold onto your horses because this thing gets large and it gets large fast. Oh, to be fair to Carrie, I thought like there might have been a bit of exaggeration on there, and like maybe Carrie has got the most ideal conditions. God, like it's Carrie was not wrong. Not wrong, Carrie. You were so right about this. This thing gets huge, and it gets huge fast. Like if you consider that it only had like a few leaves that were about this size, less than a year ago when I got this, and it's already got all of this. And to be fair, if I'd given it even more perfect conditions, it probably would have been even bigger. It consistently grows even with the variegation. It doesn't really struggle with any real pests, I'll say that. And it can be really forgiving. Now, how am I growing this? I'm growing this in a clear pot with air holes in it in an Anthurium soil mix. I use the one from Soil Ninja. And I've got a bit of a damp sphagnum moss collar, mainly because the summer this was drying way too much. But consistency, and it doesn't ever skip a beat. It's still growing. It gets some really interesting, it doesn't really grow, at least in my experience, too much in the winter. But these petioles have got a pinkish kind of burgundy, almost blush, and the main mid vein will have that as well. As it matures, it will die back to a more kind of greenish color. And the variegation will get a bit more muddy, and you probably are seeing some of that muddiness now because it's the winter time. But come the summer, when it gets like longer days of light and brighter light, absolutely, possibly one of the easiest Anthuriums that I've got in my collection. And it's a variegated plant. And it's a variegated Anthurium. And I'm saying that a variegated Anthurium is an easy plant. That should tell you something. So yeah, I've only ever grown it in here. So I don't know if I've never attempted to grow this in regular household conditions, but having looked at the leaves, they're relatively kind of leathery. There's no kind of fuzziness or velvetiness to this as well. And because it's a bird's nest Anthurium, and might be the only bird's nest Anthurium that I own, I do know that they are meant to be slightly hardier. Please do feel free down below if you've got this plant and you are growing this in household conditions to tell us how you are finding this. But I could not make a list of a plant that's supposed to be difficult, and variegated Anthuriums specifically have got that notion of being more challenging than even regular Anthuriums. That has not been the case with this plant, and the variegation and the coloration is beautiful. As I said, it does dull down in the winter. Some of the older leaves have kept their variegation a bit more, but absolutely could not make this list without having this on there. Stunning, stunning Anthurium. So yes, what did you think? Did any of your favorites make it onto this list? Did I miss any? Do you want to share your difficult plants that ended up actually being relatively easy to care for? As I said, most of these plants, or at least the kind of grouping of plants, like the variegated Anthuriums as a whole, variegated Philodendrons, all of these things can be a bit more challenging. I know a lot of people are not into their variegation anymore, and that's absolutely fine, but it's still the Burle Marx Variegata, still beautiful and easy plant, even as a non-variegated plant. Yes, the Renaissance is variegated, but if you like a bird's nest Anthurium and you want something that grows super fast that isn't particularly fussy, that would still be my suggestion. You might come to love the variegation on that plant specifically. There's all of these things that I would say it's worth a trial, and if you want something that's truly green, go for the Anthurium esmeraldense. The Nepenthes, nowhere near as difficult as other kind of carnivorous plants that you need to baby so much. There are plants out there that do have this, at least in my opinion, and again, I know we are not going to all agree on this, and that's absolutely fine, but these are the ones that I have found were actually a lot easier than I was expecting them to be. But anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.